In this video we're just going to be talking about customizing the dials for ISO on the Panasonic GH6 and specifically adding in the ISO limiter feature to our shortcut menu. So this feature is available for both photo and video modes, and this is really worth knowing about this feature. It's really useful, and it's something that to be honest it would be useful to have set up by default in the camera, but it's not. So it's a good one to add, I think, for photographers or videographers. I talked about why ISO is so important in another video, and I'll link that above. So if you don't really know much about ISO, then that video is really worth watching before this, and you'll get a bit of a better understanding of how to actually kind of set this feature. So first thing we'll do, let's switch on the camera and we'll just jump into the menu. So we're specifically talking about the ISO menu here. So if we click on that, and then it brings up this menu, which you should be quite familiar with. You've got the option to work in auto, or you can come across and you can manually set the ISO. So you've got kind of two options there. And the way it works is we can essentially set it by using this wheel, this one here, or the one on the back of the camera. So either of these dials and wheels, and this one, so all three of them essentially move it. We've got options all around the camera to be moving it. Your ISO will potentially look different to mine, and that all depends on what picture profile you're using, whether you've got dynamic range boost enabled or DR boost, and also I've got the extended ISO range running on my camera, and again, that's something I'd really recommend doing. So I'll leave a link up in the corner so you can look into having the extended ISO range. I think that's something, to be honest, that's really useful as well. So setting both of these up in my eyes is well worth doing on this camera. So to be clear here, before we jump into the menu, we can only do this, we can only set a limit if we're working within manual ISO. So if we're in, other way around, we can only set a limit if we're in auto ISO, So if we're selecting our own ISO, there is no limit, because we're saying, you know, this is essentially the ISO I want to work with. So whether you're working ISO 100, or maybe you've got DR boost on and you're in 800 or potentially even 2000, you're setting that yourself, and you're saying, you know, this is the ISO, don't change it. And obviously, whilst you're filming, that stops your exposure from changing. So the way this works is we jump into auto, and then it will give us a limiter feature. So we're just kind of saying, okay, don't go all the way up to, you know, the really extreme ISOs, because we know we're going to get kind of noise there. So what we do is jump into the menu. So hit the menu button, and we want the cog or the gear. And then we jump into the one with the top wheel on it, and that's the operation menu. And the one we want is ISO display setting. So if we jump into that, and then you can see here, this is the default option we've got. I've left it set as default so you can see essentially what it will be. So it says front and rear dials, and to be honest, I find the terminology of this quite confusing when you're trying to set it up. So you can just kind of do it and see which way you prefer, but essentially they're talking about these two here. And, you know, front and rear is a little bit, you know, debatable about which is which when you're working with the camera, or how you're looking at the camera and how that works. But yeah, if we jump into it, so essentially it's saying both of these at the moment set the ISO. And you can see here we've got different options. So we've got ISO limit, ISO. So one of them, then one wheel would set the ISO limit, one would set the ISO. This one would actually switch one of them off, and the other one just becomes the ISO option. This is switched around, so you know, that would be the opposite way around. One's a limit, one's the ISO. We can look at that. And the other one is the ISO and one's switched off. My preference would be either the second one down or second from the bottom. So you can see if we click on this one and then we come back to the camera. Now, like I say, you need to be in auto, which we are. And then you can see here at the top, we've got ISO limit 3200. And now with the top wheel, I can actually set that. So if I want it to be a very low ISO limit, you know, I can go to 200 or 400. You can actually even set that to auto if you're not sure. And, you know, for particular shots you just think, actually I'm not sure, I'm just going to set that to auto as well, because it may be that you know, you set your ISO limit to 200 and then you'll find actually you'll end up with a bit of an underexposed shot. So say for example in this, if we set it to 50, it's probably actually just going to work, isn't it? If we set it to 50 but then I set the, oh sorry, let me just change this into video mode. Like I say, this works in both. So if I'm in the video mode, you can see I'm way underexposed. I'm 3 under. So when you flick back to auto, obviously it's going to resolve that. But then if I change the ISO limit again, you can see we're underexposed. So it might be that you just want to flick that into auto, which of course you can, or just pick a sort of a higher ISO limit. And again, you know, we're using this wheel here to just change our actual ISO. If we want to just say, actually I don't want auto, I want to pick one. And then if we come back into the menu again, and like I say, you can swap these round. So if you were to do it that way, and we jump back into, you always need to be into the ISO menu, the wheel won't do it otherwise. Now this wheel here is setting our limit, and this one at the front is now setting our ISO. So, and the other way, like I say, you can just switch one of the dials off if you find it, you know, you don't like having both dials doing the ISO. So it's just a really nice way to bring that into the menu. I mean, for me, I work with the if I'm ever in auto, I'm always going to set an ISO limit. I'll never let the camera just decide for me, because some of these higher ones, like I say, you're going to end up with a lot of noise in your shots. And I do use noise reduction software where I need to, but ideally I'd like to just get it right in the shot. So I'd highly recommend checking that out and using it. It's a really good feature on the camera. So hopefully you found that helpful. If you have, give the video a like. If you want to see more about the Panasonic GH6, then check out the playlist on this channel, and please subscribe.